They fired me for being useless. Now I own the company. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. They called me useless. Today I signed the papers to buy their entire company. Sitting in what used to be the CEO's office, my office now, I can still hear those words echoing from 5 years ago. You're just not a good fit for our team, Marcus. We need people who can deliver results, and frankly, you're not cutting it. The irony isn't lost on me. The nameplate on this mahogany desk now reads Marcus Chen, CEO. The same desk where Richard Blackstone once sat, the man who destroyed my confidence with surgical precision, now belongs to me. Every square foot of TechFlow Solutions, from the polished marble lobby to the state-of-the-art server rooms, is mine. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about what happens when the world tells you you're worthless, and you decide to prove them wrong. 5 years ago, I was a different man. Eager, optimistic, maybe even naive. I'd graduated from Stanford with a computer science degree and landed what I thought was my dream job at TechFlow Solutions, a mid-tier software consulting firm in San Francisco. At 25, I felt like I'd made it. TechFlow had this sleek office in Soma with exposed brick walls, ping-pong tables, and those trendy standing desks that made you feel like you were part of something revolutionary. The company specialized in enterprise software solutions, helping Fortune 500 companies streamline their operations. Nothing groundbreaking, but solid, profitable work. I remember my first day vividly. Richard Blackstone, the CEO, was this silver-haired man in his 50s who wore expensive suits and spoke in corporate buzzwords like they were poetry. He shook my hand with the kind of firm grip that said, "I'm important, and if you're lucky, some of that importance might rub off on you." "Welcome to the TechFlow family, Marcus," he said, flashing that practiced smile. "We're excited to see what fresh ideas you'll bring to the table." Fresh ideas. I had plenty of those. For the first few months, I threw myself into the work with religious devotion. I arrived early, stayed late, and volunteered for every project that crossed my desk. I was assigned to the development team under Sarah Mitchell, a sharp woman in her 40s who had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer competence and political savvy. My cubicle was positioned perfectly to observe the office dynamics. There was Brad Hoffman, the golden boy who somehow managed to take credit for everyone else's work while producing little of his own. He had that effortless charm that made executives feel comfortable, always ready with a joke or a compliment about someone's golf game. Then there was Jennifer Liu, brilliant but quiet, who did the heavy lifting on most projects while others basked in the glory. I fell into the Jennifer category, except I wasn't quiet about it. "I think we're approaching this client integration all wrong," I said during a team meeting in my 3rd month. "Instead of forcing them to adapt to our existing framework, we should build something modular that scales with their specific needs." The room went quiet. Sarah looked up from her laptop with that expression managers get when a junior employee steps out of their lane. "That's an interesting perspective, Marcus," she said in that tone that meant the opposite. "But we have established protocols here. Let's stick to what works." What worked, I learned, was keeping your head down and not challenging the status quo. But I was young, ambitious, and convinced that good ideas would speak for themselves. I kept pushing, kept suggesting improvements, kept believing that meritocracy was more than just a corporate buzzword. I spent my first year building tools that automated repetitive tasks, developing more efficient algorithms, and creating documentation that actually made sense. I thought I was being indispensable. What I was actually doing was making myself a target. Chen's always got something to prove. I overheard Brad telling another colleague by the coffee machine, "Guy needs to learn his place." But I didn't learn my place. Instead, I worked harder. I stayed until midnight debugging code that should have been finished hours earlier. I took on projects that others considered beneath them. I answered emails on weekends and came in during holidays. I was the definition of a company man, loyal to a fault. The first performance review came at the end of my first year. Sarah sat across from me in the sterile conference room with its motivational posters and whiteboard covered in month-old strategy diagrams. "Marcus, you're technically competent," she began, and I could already hear the but coming. "But you need to work on your collaboration skills. Some of your colleagues find your suggestions disruptive." Disruptive. I'd suggested a better way to handle database queries that would save the company thousands of hours annually. Disruptive. "I understand," I lied. "I'll work on being more of a team player." "Good. We're giving you a 3 raise and keeping you at the same level. Keep up the good work, and we'll revisit your role next year." 3%. Inflation was running at 4. The second year was worse. I watched Brad get promoted to senior developer after delivering a project 2 months late and significantly over budget. Jennifer left for Google, citing limited growth opportunities. New hires with half my experience were brought in at salaries higher than mine. I should have seen the writing on the wall, but I was trapped in that corporate delusion that hard work eventually gets rewarded. I kept grinding, kept believing that eventually someone would notice. The breaking point came during year 3. Our biggest client, Meridian Industries, was threatening to leave because of performance issues with their system. It was a $2 million contract, and losing it would mean layoffs. I spent 6 weeks of my own time diagnosing the problem and developing a solution. The issue was in the core architecture, something that required a complete overhaul of how we handled their data processing. It was elegant, efficient, and would not only solve their immediate problem, but position them for future growth. I presented it to the team with the enthusiasm of a man who thought he was saving the company. "This is impressive work, Marcus," Sarah said, scrolling through my presentation. "Really thorough." For a moment, I thought I'd finally broken through. Then Brad leaned forward with that snake oil smile of his. "Though I have to ask, did you run this by anyone before diving so deep? We might have saved you some time." "I wanted to have a complete solution before bringing it forward," I said, feeling the first prickle of unease. "Well, the thing is," Brad continued, "I've been working on something similar with the architecture team. Haven't you, Sarah?" Sarah nodded slowly. "We've been exploring some options, yes." I watched in real time as my 6 weeks of work became similar to what we were already considering, and then a good starting point for the official solution. By the end of the meeting, Brad was leading the implementation of my design, and I was assigned to support the initiative. Brad got a promotion and a $10,000 bonus for innovative problem solving that saved the Meridian account. I got a certificate of appreciation that probably cost less than the frame it came in. That night, I sat in my studio apartment in Oakland, staring at the certificate and drinking cheap whiskey. My girlfriend Emma had left 6 months earlier, tired of dating someone who was married to a job that doesn't love him back. My parents kept asking when I was going to buy a house, get married, start building a real life. At 28, I was making barely more than I had straight out of college, and my career seemed to be moving backward. But the worst part wasn't the money or the recognition. It was the creeping realization that I was becoming invisible, that my ideas only mattered when someone else claimed them. The 4th year brought a new manager. Sarah had been promoted to director, replaced by Michael Torres, a hire from outside the company who came in with promises of shaking things up and empowering our talent. Michael was different, younger, more energetic, with an MBA from Wharton and ideas about disrupting the disruption. In our first one-on-one, he actually listened when I talked about the improvements I'd been proposing. "Marcus, I've been reviewing your work, and I'm impressed," he said, leaning back in his chair with genuine interest. "You clearly understand our systems better than most people here. How would you feel about taking on more responsibility?" For the first time in 3 years, I felt hope. "I'd love that," I said. "I have some ideas about where we could improve efficiency across multiple client accounts." "Let's hear them." I spent the next hour outlining a comprehensive strategy for modernizing TechFlow's approach to client integration. I showed him data on performance improvements, cost savings, and client satisfaction metrics. I had charts, projections, and concrete implementation timelines. Michael nodded throughout, asking smart questions and taking notes. "This is exactly the kind of thinking we need," he said finally. "I want you to prepare a formal presentation for the leadership team. This could be big for you, Marcus." I spent the next 2 weeks perfecting that presentation. I rehearsed it until I could deliver it in my sleep. I prepared for every possible question, every potential objection. This was my moment, my chance to finally prove what I was capable of. The day of the presentation, I arrived early and set up the conference room. Richard Blackstone would be there, along with the other VPs and department heads. My career was about to change. Then Michael walked in with Brad. "Slight change of plans," Michael said with an apologetic smile. "Brad's going to co-present with you. He's been working on complementary research." Complementary research. The same research I'd shared with Michael in our meetings over the past 2 weeks. I won't bore you with the details of what happened next. Let's just say that by the end of the presentation, Brad was fielding most of the questions and I was relegated to advancing the slides. The executives praised our innovative approach and collaborative thinking. Brad got the promotion I'd been working toward for 4 years. I got assigned to his team as his subordinate. The final insult came 6 months later. Brad decided that my attitude had become problematic and that I was resistant to feedback. He recommended me for what the company euphemistically called a performance improvement plan. That's when I found myself sitting across from Richard Blackstone in his corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay and its walls covered in awards and photos of him shaking hands with various celebrities and politicians. "Marcus," he began, not bothering to look up from his tablet. "We need to have a difficult conversation." I knew what was coming, but hearing it was still a punch to the gut. "Your performance over the past year has been concerning. Despite multiple opportunities for growth and feedback from your supervisors, we haven't seen the improvement we need to see." "Sir, with all due respect, I've been one of the most productive developers on the team. I've delivered every project on time and under budget." Now he looked up, and I saw something cold in his eyes. "Marcus, productivity isn't just about code. It's about being a team player. It's about fitting into our culture. And frankly, you've shown that you're not capable of either." The words hit like physical blows. Not capable. "We're going to have to let you go," he continued, his voice as flat as if he were reading a grocery list. "HR will handle the details, but your last day is Friday." I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. 4 years of my life, 4 years of 60-hour weeks, skipped vacations and sacrificed relationships. "Is there anything I could have done differently?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Richard finally showed some emotion, though it wasn't compassion. He looked annoyed, like I was wasting his time with stupid questions. "Marcus, some people are just not cut out for this level of business. You're a decent coder, but you lack the strategic thinking and leadership qualities we need. You're not useless, but you're not what we need here. Sometimes it's better to know your limitations." "Not useless." Damning with faint praise. I walked out of that office in a daze. The next few days passed in a blur of exit interviews, collecting personal items and forced smiles from colleagues who were probably relieved they weren't in my shoes. Jennifer, who had kept in touch since leaving for Google, took me out for drinks on my last day. "Marcus, this is the best thing that could have happened to you," she said over her martini. "That place was killing you slowly. You're too good for them." But I didn't feel too good for anything. I felt like exactly what Richard had said I was, someone who wasn't cut out for this level of business. The first few weeks after the firing were the darkest of my life. I slept until noon, ate cereal for dinner, and applied for jobs with the enthusiasm of a man scheduling his own execution. The unemployment benefits barely covered my rent, and my savings were pathetic after years of hoping for bonuses that never came. My parents called every other day with a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Maybe you should consider going back to school," my mother suggested. "Get an MBA. That's what successful people do." "Or maybe look at government jobs," my father added. "More stable, better benefits." They meant well, but their advice felt like accepting defeat. I was 30 years old, and they were talking about me like I was a college dropout who needed to find a safe harbor. The worst part was the silence from my former colleagues. People I'd considered friends suddenly stopped responding to texts. My LinkedIn network, so eager to connect when I was employed, went quiet. I was a pariah, someone whose failure might be contagious. But sometimes rock bottom is exactly where you need to land to remember how to climb. The moment of clarity came 3 months after the firing. I was at a Starbucks in Berkeley, half-heartedly scrolling through job postings on my laptop, when I overheard 2 guys at the next table talking about their startup. "The problem with enterprise software," one was saying, is that it's all built by people who've never actually had to use it. They design these massive, bloated systems that require 6 months of training just to send an email. His friend nodded. And then they charge you a fortune for customization that still doesn't work right. I looked up from my screen. These guys were maybe 25, wearing hoodies and speaking with the casual confidence of people who'd never been told they weren't cut out for business. That's when it hit me. I'd been thinking about the problem all wrong. I'd been trying to fix broken systems from the inside, when what the market really needed was someone to start over from scratch. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of looking for another job where I could be another cog in someone else's machine, I was going to build my own machine. I had exactly $4,000 in my checking account and a head full of ideas that had been dismissed as disruptive for 4 years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. The next morning, I registered a business license for Chen Solutions, a one-man consulting firm specializing in custom enterprise software. My office was the corner table at the Starbucks where I'd had my epiphany. My first business cards were printed at Kinko's and looked like they'd been designed by a middle schooler. But I had something that TechFlow had lost somewhere along the way. I actually cared about solving problems. My first client was a small accounting firm in Oakland whose existing software was so bad that they were doing half their work on spreadsheets. The owner, Maria Santos, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had built her practice from nothing and had zero patience for corporate BS. "Every software company I've worked with treats me like I'm stupid," she said during our first meeting. "They sell me something that doesn't work, then charge me extra to fix it. Can you actually help me, or are you just another salesman?" "Mrs. Santos," I said, "I got fired from my last job for caring too much about actually solving problems. If you want someone who's going to listen to what you need and build exactly that, I'm your guy. If you want corporate polish and a team of account managers, you should probably look elsewhere." She laughed. "You're hired." That first project took me 6 weeks and paid $8,000. It wasn't much, but it was $8,000 for work that I'd done exactly the way I thought it should be done, with no Brad to steal credit and no Sarah to call my ideas disruptive. More importantly, Maria was delighted with the result. The system I built cut her processing time in half and eliminated most of the data entry errors that had been plaguing her practice. She recommended me to 3 other small businesses, and suddenly I had more work than I could handle. I was coding 18 hours a day and loving every minute of it. By the end of my first year, I had 15 clients and was generating 6 figures in revenue. I hired my first employee, a recent graduate named Kevin who reminded me of myself at 25, hungry, idealistic, and convinced that good work would speak for itself. The difference was that in my company, it actually would. I rented a small office in Oakland. Nothing fancy, just a converted warehouse space with good natural light and room to grow. No ping pong table, no motivational posters, just desks and whiteboards and the kind of focused energy that comes from people who believe in what they're building. The second year brought bigger clients and bigger challenges. A mid-sized manufacturing company hired us to overhaul their supply chain management system. It was exactly the kind of complex, multi-layered project that TechFlow specialized in, except we finished it in 3 months instead of 8 and came in 30% under budget. Word spread. In the Bay Area tech scene, good work has a way of finding its audience, especially when it's coming from someone who's not trying to upsell you on features you don't need. By year 3, we had 12 employees in offices in Oakland and San Jose. We were competing for contracts against companies 10 times our size and winning because we actually understood what clients needed instead of what we wanted to sell them. But the real breakthrough came when we landed Meridian Industries as a client. Remember them? The same company whose account I'd saved at TechFlow, only to watch Brad take credit for my work. Their CTO, David Kim, had been frustrated with TechFlow's service for months. They overpromise and underdeliver, he told me during our initial meeting. Every solution they propose is designed to lock us into their ecosystem instead of solving our actual problems. "What if," I said, "I told you that we specialize in building systems that you could theoretically take in-house if you ever wanted to part ways with us?" His eyebrows went up. That would be a first. The Meridian project was our largest contract to date, a complete overhaul of their customer relationship management system. It was the kind of work that could make or break a young company. We delivered it in 4 months. On time, under budget, and so much better than their previous system that their customer satisfaction scores jumped 20% in the first quarter after implementation. David Kim became one of our biggest advocates, recommending us to other CTOs in his network. Suddenly, we weren't just another consulting firm. We were the consultants that other consultants measured themselves against. That's when TechFlow first appeared on my radar again. I was reading industry publications more regularly now, keeping track of market trends and competitor activities. TechFlow had made the news for losing several major clients, including Meridian. Their stock price had dropped 15% over 6 months, and there were rumors of layoffs. Richard Blackstone was quoted in a TechWeek article defending the company's performance. We remain committed to providing enterprise-level solutions to enterprise-level clients. Not every company is ready for the kind of sophisticated systems we develop. The same arrogance that had defined my experience there was now driving away their customers. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. All those talented people I'd worked with, trapped in a system that rewarded politics over performance. Jennifer had been smart to leave when she did, but I didn't dwell on it. I was too busy building something better. By year 4, Chen Solutions had 50 employees and clients across 12 states. We'd opened an office in Austin and were exploring opportunities in Seattle. I'd been featured on the cover of Bay Area Business Journal as one of the region's entrepreneurs to watch. The article mentioned my background at TechFlow in passing. Chen's experience at established firms taught him what not to do when building client relationships. I framed that quote and hung it in my office. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was reviewing quarterly numbers when my assistant, Patricia, knocked on my door. "Marcus, there's a Richard Blackstone online too. Says it's regarding a business opportunity." I stared at her for a moment, wondering if I'd heard correctly. Richard Blackstone? From TechFlow? That's what he said. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Richard, this is unexpected." His voice was the same, though there was something different in his tone, less commanding, more careful. "Marcus, thank you for taking my call. I'll cut right to the chase. We're exploring strategic partnerships, and your company has come up in several conversations. I was hoping we could meet and discuss some potential synergies." Strategic partnerships. Synergies. The same corporate speak he'd used to fire me 5 years earlier. What kind of partnership did you have in mind?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Well, that's what I'd like to discuss in person. Would you be available for lunch this week?" I almost laughed. The man who'd told me I wasn't cut out for business was now asking me to lunch to discuss partnerships. "I can do Thursday," I said. 1 o'clock at Boulevard. "Perfect. I'll make a reservation." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, trying to process what had just happened. Patricia was still standing in the doorway. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just a ghost from the past." The lunch was everything I expected and nothing I expected. Richard looked older, grayer, with new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. He was still wearing expensive suits, but they seemed to hang on him differently, like armor that had lost its protective power. We made small talk through the appetizers, but I could see him working up to something. Finally, over the main course, he laid his cards on the table. "Marcus, I'm going to be direct. TechFlow is going through a transition period. We've had some challenges with client retention, and frankly, we've been slow to adapt to changing market conditions." I took a sip of my wine and said nothing. "Your company, on the other hand, has built an impressive reputation very quickly. You're winning contracts that used to come to us automatically." "The market rewards results," I said. "Exactly. Which is why I think there could be significant value in combining our strengths. TechFlow has the established relationships and infrastructure, while Chen Solutions has the innovation and agility." He was talking about an acquisition, though he was too proud to say it directly. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. "Well, there are several models we could explore. A merger, an acquisition, even a strategic investment. We're open to different structures." I set down my fork and looked at him directly. "Richard, are you asking me to buy TechFlow?" For the first time since I'd known him, Richard Blackstone looked uncomfortable. "I'm asking you to consider how we might work together to mutual benefit." The conversation continued for another hour, but that was the moment I knew I had them. TechFlow wasn't looking for a partnership. They were looking for a lifeline. Over the next 6 weeks, I had my lawyers and accountants dig into TechFlow's financials. What they found was a company in serious decline. Revenue was down 40% from its peak. Several major clients had jumped ship, and they were carrying debt that they couldn't service much longer. Richard had been putting on a brave face, but TechFlow was maybe 18 months away from bankruptcy. I made my offer in December. Chen Solutions would acquire TechFlow's assets, assume their remaining contracts, and offer positions to their key employees. It wasn't a merger or a partnership, it was a buyout. The final negotiation took place in the same conference room where I'd been fired 5 years earlier. Richard sat across from me with his lawyers, and I couldn't help but notice that Brad was nowhere to be seen. I'd learned through Jennifer that he'd been laid off 6 months earlier as part of the company's cost-cutting measures. "The terms are fair," Richard said, reviewing the contract for the third time. "Though I have to ask, why are you doing this? You could probably wait 6 months and pick up our assets for half the price in a bankruptcy sale." It was a good question, and one I'd been asking myself. "Because this isn't about getting the best deal," I said. "It's about doing business the right way. Your employees deserve better than watching their company collapse around them. Your clients deserve continuity. And honestly, TechFlow has good people who've been held back by bad management. I'd rather give them a chance to succeed than watch them scatter to the wind." Richard stared at me for a long moment. "You know," he said finally, 5 years ago, I would have said you were too soft for business. 5 years ago, you said I wasn't cut out for business at all." He had the grace to look embarrassed. For what it's worth, I was wrong about that. The acquisition closed on February 15th. I kept most of TechFlow's employees, including Sarah, who turned out to be a capable manager when she didn't have to navigate Richard's political games. Michael Torres had actually been a good hire. He just hadn't been given the authority to make the changes the company needed. I combined the teams, eliminated the redundant layers of management, and focused everyone on the same thing that had built Chen Solutions: solving client problems instead of playing corporate politics. The transition wasn't seamless, but it was successful. Within 6 months, client satisfaction scores were up across the board, and we'd won back 2 of the major accounts that had left TechFlow the previous year. But the moment I'll never forget came 3 months after the acquisition. I was walking through the old TechFlow offices, now just another floor in our expanded headquarters, when I ran into Janet from HR. She'd been one of the people who'd processed my firing. "Marcus," she said, stopping me in the hallway. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For keeping everyone on. When we heard about the buyout, a lot of us thought we'd be out of jobs within a month. Instead, this is the best the company culture has been in years." I smiled. "Everyone deserves a chance to do good work, Janet. Sometimes it just takes the right environment." As I walked away, I thought about that scared, angry 28-year-old who'd been escorted out of this building 5 years earlier. He'd believed that the world owed him recognition for his hard work. He'd thought that good ideas and dedication were enough. He'd been wrong about the recognition part, but right about everything else. Good ideas and dedication were enough. You just had to be in a position where they mattered. That evening, I sat in Richard's old office, now mine, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. The nameplate on the desk read, Marcus Chen, CEO, and below it, in smaller text, Chen Solutions Group. I thought about calling Emma, my ex-girlfriend, to tell her about the acquisition. She'd probably read about it in the business pages anyway. I thought about calling my parents, who'd stopped asking when I was going to get a real job about 2 years ago. Instead, I called Jennifer. "You bought TechFlow?" she said, not bothering to hide her amazement. "Marcus, that's incredible. How does it feel?" "Honestly, weird. 5 years ago, I thought getting fired from here was the end of the world. Now I own the place." "And Richard? How did he take it?" "Better than I expected. I think he knew it was coming." "Are you going to make any big changes?" I looked around the office. The awards and celebrity photos were gone, replaced by whiteboards covered in project timelines and client feedback scores. "I already have," I said. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet office and thought about the path that had brought me here. Every rejection, every stolen idea, every moment when I'd been told I wasn't good enough. It had all led to this. I wasn't the same person who'd been fired from this job 5 years ago. That Marcus had been looking for validation from people who were never going to give it. This Marcus had learned to validate himself. The real victory wasn't buying the company that had rejected me. It was building something better than what they'd had to offer in the first place. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin, my first employee, who was now my VP of development. Saw the news coverage. Congrats, boss. Drinks tomorrow to celebrate? I typed back, sure, but we're not celebrating the acquisition. We're celebrating what comes next. Because that's the thing about revenge, the real kind. It's not about destroying your enemies or proving them wrong. It's about building something so much better that their approval becomes irrelevant. They called me useless. Today, I own their company. But more importantly, I've built something that makes their opinion meaningless. I've created jobs for people who deserve better than corporate politics. I've solved problems for clients who were tired of being treated like walking checkbooks. I've become exactly what I always knew I could be, with or without their permission. The desk phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Patricia's voice came through the intercom. Marcus, I have David Kim from Meridian Online 1. He says congratulations are in order. I smiled and picked up the phone. David, good to hear from you. Marcus, I just saw the announcement. You bought TechFlow? That's incredible. It seemed like the right move. They have good people who deserve a better platform. Well, I can tell you from experience that you're exactly what they needed. Listen, I've got 3 other CTOs who've been asking about your services. Can we set up some introductions? Absolutely. Have Patricia schedule something for next week. After I hung up, I leaned back in the chair and looked around the office one more time. 5 years ago, I'd sat in a cubicle outside this door, convinced that if I just worked hard enough, eventually someone would notice. I'd been right about the working hard part. I'd just been wrong about who needed to notice. The person who needed to notice was me. The intercom buzzed again. Marcus, your 4 o'clock is here. The team from Austin wants to discuss the Seattle expansion. Send them in, I said, straightening my tie and opening my laptop. There was work to do, problems to solve, and a company to build. The same things I'd always wanted to do, just finally in a place where they mattered. They called me useless. Today, I'm useful to everyone who matters, including myself.